Hello, my name is Michelle Powers, and I'm a professional artist and master teacher in art for all levels, pre-K through adults. And I've been presenting videos on my channel, Suzanne Michelle Powers, on creativity and the elements of art. They're based on an NEA project I had in Monterey County as a professional artist in the schools. And it's just a breakdown of art, and we made a big, beautiful, three-dimensional painted sculpture, elementary kids. And it was all abstract. I've had friends and on jobs who have said, please, tell us what creativity is. We've had such bad teachers, we don't understand. And I had no idea people weren't talking about creativity the right way. So this is an attempt that I'm making to show the breakdown of teaching from the Renaissance to the present day in abstract forms of art. And we've already touched on the dot and the line, which is a line between two dots, a shape, which is dots and lines all connected, and form, which becomes a three-dimensional shape in the best way to make sculpture. We're going to look at composition today and perspective and architecture, a little bit of architecture going back to the Renaissance. We're going to look at Michelangelo and Da Vinci, my two favorite Renaissance artists. Da Vinci, the oldest, of course, and an engineer, and Michelangelo, an artist, a sculptor, and architect, and a colorist, which is what I am. But right now we're doing, for the last several videos, we have been looking at sketching and drawing in black and white, and we're going to add color hopefully next week. And that's a whole nother ball game. It's going to be a lot of fun. So you want to have your sketchbooks, and if you want to go do what I'm doing, if you want to draw and do the things I'm doing, or just take notes, or just watch, you can always come back and look at this video and get an idea what you want. I emphasize individuality. Art is an opportunity for the imagination, which belongs to the individual, to express itself. And you can pick the medium you want. We have pressed charcoal chalk, and in pencil form, and just loose charcoals, very soft, and blenders, cloths, erasers, and you want your sketchbook out, and hopefully you'll have newsprint, which is a very low-grade paper, very cheap and inexpensive, and you can practice doing all kinds of studies using these elements and get familiar with them, because once you master the elements, when you start making your final large compositions and hopefully a painting, it'll be second nature. It will be subconscious. You won't have to look and think lines and textures and so on, or you might just very informally think, oh, that needs some texture there, needs some shading of some kind. So we're going to add now composition using contours. Remember, we did gestures and contours just briefly, and this is contours, and perspective on the page and off the page. And we're going to look at no perspective as we reach abstract painters in the late 1800s and early part of this last century, where the line of perspective disappears, and it's a new kind of spatial concept. And that would be Kandinsky, who is one of my favorite authors of art as spirituality, and his special writings on point, line, and shape. And that is, he was a Russian who escaped to Germany and then escaped to Paris as fascism grew in different forms in Russia and Europe. So we're going to look at developing a composition. You have an idea. Remember, you had a viewfinder. You have an idea that you like, whether it's animals, a person you want to draw, some furniture, a still life you want to put together. I've put a still life of glass objects here for contour drawing. We're going to do a little bit. And whatever you want to do, if you just want to scribble and do your imagination and pick out shapes, that's all right. I already have introduced that as a possibility. Remember, though, to have your viewfinder to, if you're picking out a shape around you, to help you focus on just that part. That helps you with your composition. Because if you want to do a whole room or a whole building, if you're architecturally minded, that's okay. But sometimes we just want to do specific parts. And also there are studies that we make. If you want to do a large composition of a family group, for instance, or animals that you love, or trees, a grove of trees. Sometimes it's good to just do studies on your newsprint, for instance, that gives you an idea of how you're going to draw those figures or those shapes, those objects. And here's an interesting idea from Leonardo. He did, remember one of his famous paintings is The Last Supper, or the Lord's Supper in Milan, Italy. And these are some drawings that he did in studies in red Conti crayon of the different figures and how he wanted to place them in his painting. So first he did a lot of studies, and they're beautifully rendered, of course, of different expressions, who they were, how he wanted them to depict them, before he ever attempted the final project. Again, some more of a finished study, and some unfinished studies, some contour, taking the gesture and making a contour of figures, and the drawings themselves are very interesting. They're studies of faces, different faces. I don't know if you can see this or not. But again, remember I said to pick out some of your favorite artists and go to the library and get their books, because you will find, if you can study them and look up close and read what they say about what it's like to be creative, it will help you understand what you need to do when you develop your own subject. Okay. Now, we have also one of my favorite artists ever, who influenced me in my early years when I became more serious about art, Michelangelo. And he has in his notebook, both of them have notebooks, Leonardo and Michelangelo. So does Kandinsky, writings. And I always want to emphasize how important it is to get to know individual artists, and the ones that you want to know about, or that you don't understand and would like to know more about, or that you love already. And I had people like that, but I had no idea how wonderful it was going to be to get acquainted with them in a deeper way through reading and looking at their art and learning how to look at their art. It's very important. And they have in their sketchbooks, they have the sketches, their notebooks, they have their writings and the sketches of some of their most famous works, of course, they're in there, and then the writings around them. For instance, the spiritual side. Michelangelo, of course, did a lot of work for the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church, although he himself was Pentecostal, and the intellects of his day and his group were as well. And one of his titles in his book, his notebooks, is Love and Judgment. And definitely that's going to have some spiritual content, some values, and you want to keep your values, the values of different artists and what they meant in as they did their art. Because art isn't a cold, empty thing. If it is, there's something wrong. It's something that comes from within a person, from their imagination, from their innovative side, from their thinking side that has let go of rules and laws and just functions on the intuitive level. And reaching that part of you that's intuitive is very important. And it isn't easy to do, and drawing and sketching is one way to free that part of you up, believe it or not. And that's why you should practice something in art at least every day, and if you can't, once a week, or look at a book of artists and their works. It doesn't matter, just maybe one piece a day of one artist will open your eyes. And then remember, art is an activity. It's something you don't passively observe and watch. Observation is the number one power of an artist, but then you must proceed and become active if you really want to pursue art. And that is learning these elements. They're not very difficult to understand, but putting them all together is another situation, and it's not that hard either. You just got to go ahead and do it. Sometimes it's just making a mark on a page, and that was one of my professors who got me over. It's what he said. He said, if you see a white canvas, you don't know what to do, just take your paintbrush full of paint and slash it all across there and get started. Don't sit there and stew over it. That's one thing you can do. Another thing is to make your studies, do your little drawings, and that would also free up your energy. Your thinking will turn into intuitive thinking, and it will pull up and out of you the things you don't put into words, the things you want to show someone in a picture. It's timeless, practically, in the existence of human beings to make a visual representation of some kind of in their art, in their environment that they want to express, a thing, a person, whatever it is, to other people. Whether it's a map, whether it's a building, I don't know. But first the drawing and the visual representation has to happen. And now we're into abstract art, which is even a deeper level of thinking and feeling than ever before. And it's very spiritual, although a lot of people don't understand that yet. But the more you do your artwork, practice art, learn about other artists, and grow in art, you'll begin to understand we are in the big final layer of thinking, and it's wide open. It's like infinity. Abstract is nothing to be afraid of. It's something that is part of every discipline there is. Writing an abstract, making an abstract painting, an avant-garde type of theater that takes an idea. And theater people are often very good friends with artists because they interlock and interface together. Music is the other one that's very important, because jazz grew out of these changes as visual artists became more abstract. And that was in the last century and a half. And of course, it's going on now. So we have Michelangelo's amazing sketches, his figures. They're just sketched in. These are sketches and drawings, studies that he did for things like the Pietà, which is one of the most moving sculptures there ever was. David, the huge sculpture of David. Just parts of pillars. He did a lot. He did tombs for the Medici family, and these are drawings in red Conti of just parts of pillars, just to get the details correct. When it was all done, it was just an amazing sight to see. But first, they always started with sketches and studies, which is what we are doing right now. Here's a wonderful study of the Medici tomb. So we have these two great masters in the Renaissance, which was over 500 years ago, that were profoundly involved in helping art to advance to a state of high level of rendering of ideas and civilization. But we live in the 21st century, and we are at this amazing abstract place, and that's important to know too. So when you do a composition, you should know what you want to include in your picture plane. Even if you have just a small sketchbook. I mean, this sketchbook is not really big. You can take it out with you, and you need to maybe do some studies of parts of the object or person you want to do to draw, or you may do a contour drawing. You may want to just think about what you want to put in your composition, the final objects you want to put in. After you use your viewfinder and you think about it and you've done your studies and sketches, how you're going to put things together. And one of those things is perspective. And perspective was pretty much invented. You don't see it in two-dimensional art on a plane in anything until the Renaissance. And perspective was really, really developed by Renaissance artists. And Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo both employed off-the-page perspective, which means they might have the page right here they're going to do their sketches or studies on, but the point of perspective is going to be off. So say it's up here in the corner, but off. So you could just decide you're going to, you take it from there and, okay, and you can just picture that off here, all these points, these lines meet. And that helps put everything in line. It helps put the trees that are far away down into a smaller size. See, a tree would be smaller if they're further away from you than a tree up close. Up close how up close you decide. But this would be a tree close to you, and the further down you get, see, they would get smaller and smaller until they're really small. All in a line. That's a perspective point off the page. You don't need a ruler for this or a yardstick. This is art. If you're an engineer or in technology that requires a lot of strict lines because it's going to have to go in code and whatever, even though that could go too, then you have to start using different tools and instruments. This is art, and it's good to understand what perspective is and where it goes. Now, if you have perspective, it's a point of perspective. Remember that, it's a point of perspective. Say you have a point of perspective, you have a horizon line, right? And back here is where the earth meets the sky. When you were little, didn't you used to put, I did, a long rectangle at the top of blue? That's the sky, and then here's all this white space, and down here a rectangle of green, that's the grass, little earth. And then you might put a sun here in the middle of the white space, you may paint it yellow, and then you might draw a tree down here on the green. Yeah, that is a child's eye view or an undeveloped eye without any perspective or understanding of spatial concepts. So remember when you were a child what that was like. Here we have a horizontal line where the earth and sky meet. Here we have a point of perspective. Let's just do an intersecting line right there. Okay, that will be the point of perspective. We're going to put a tree there. So, all right, we can draw lines like this. You don't have to draw these lines, but I'm just showing you how space changes once you draw from the line of perspective. So you can start to see distance in your plane, which is just flat, but with lines and points, you can make a distance in your drawing. And you might want to put a building back here, a little building, say. All right, your house is back here on the horizon, back at the point of perspective, and it's small. But up here, you might have a big flower. Of course, you wouldn't really have a flower here, but in your imagination, you want one. So it would be big because you're right there looking at it, and then you look in the distance and there's the house back there. You might put a tree right here. All along the way, trees, so that you have a walkway back to the house. Remember, this is a sketch, so you can go over and over the lines again and again. It doesn't matter. So that's a line of perspective and how to make distance in your plane a two-dimensional plane. It's not 3 dimensions yet. Probably after the holidays we'll do some 3-dimensional work. And that's a whole different ball game, and it's a lot of fun, but it's a whole different thinking process. Right now we're just working with 2 dimensions and how to put distance into a 2-dimensional plane, which would be your sketchbook, your painting, your canvas, whatever you're using, piece of wood. We're going to probably do some painting after Thanksgiving so that you have the holidays. You might want to go out and get some more supplies. We'll go into all those things, but I want you to have all the art elements before, I'm hoping before Thanksgiving, so that you can pick out the artists and study them, the ones that you enjoy, and then practice some of these things, like the point of perspective. You see how easy I did that. I mean, it's not with a ruler, it's not exact. Now, the people in the Renaissance, the great artists, they did do that exactly. And that helped them because they were just discovering how to make a perspective in their planes that they were drawing on, sketching on. This was a big discovery for Renaissance artists. And you'll start to see it develop. And if you look at early artists like Giotto, you don't see perspective. It's pretty much of a flatness, and figures are just placed close together on the same plane pretty much. But it's interesting to look at because he starts to be individualized. He starts to individualize the figures. And it's really sweet. His paintings are very sweet to look at. Okay, so we have perspective off point of perspective off the sheet of paper and on the sheet of paper. That is something you want to incorporate if you're doing buildings or a room, or if you're doing an arm, you have an arm extended to you. You also could do a study of an arm extended towards you and your hand, but going down and ending at your elbow in a perspective line. There are all kinds of ways to explore this. Some people love perspective. Then we have the perspective of the abstract artists. And we come to Kandinsky with this. He's one of my favorite illustrations of the end of perspective. And here are some wonderful abstract paintings. And they suggest some kind of the lines, and they're not made with any rulers. He has 3 different lines here, but they're not, the one's thicker than the other. Here's some curvy lines out there. Here's like a hand, pointed lines. Here's a big black line here. But see, you see suggestions of things, but they're gone. They're gone. They disappear into abstraction. And there's beautiful colors, gorgeous colors in there. And there's a depth, but all of a sudden it flattens out. That's because the line of perspective is gone. It ends. He doesn't use it anymore. He finds another space to work with. And that is a painter who was working in the 1800s, late 1800s up to the 1940s. And he influenced so many modern artists. And to this day, people know that the freeing of the plane and the lines and the dots really start with someone like Kandinsky, and he is like the father of abstract art. People in the Impressionism were getting away from the plane Turner being defined by a horizon. You see his beautiful paintings, and Monet just dissolving into beautiful light pastels and textures and patterns. And there's parts of working in a composition and putting together what you want in your drawing or your painting eventually that include some more things which add a depth, not of perspective, but pattern and texture. And that can be made with colors or lines, as you saw in the Kandinsky paintings. And the thing you need to do now, you can experiment, and you may find something you really love to do. Kandinsky's paintings only got deeper and deeper in the abstract as he lived. And he was so influential. Einstein was one of his friends. And Einstein loved the freeing of his imagination. A lot of artists think of childhood as a time when you can free and do the things your intuition says you can do, and not the rules that have been laid down. These are things that are guide your visual impressions, your heart, your spirit, your soul, whatever. Until they may not, that part of you may not fit in the formulas that have been developed. Mine didn't fit into plane geometry, but I love to work on planes in an abstract way, into abstract shapes, and my figures especially. I don't paint figures much anymore. I'm just now getting to a point where I'm involved to just a landscape, seascape color block. Color field painting is what it's called. And a great painter named Rothko, which we will study more about when we add color. Next week we're going to do, well, I should maybe do texture and pattern with you now, but I'm suggesting it now, thinking about it. Remember cross-hatching, stippling, and it'll go into colors as well, texture and pattern, and think of it as developing space on your shapes on your two-dimensional plane. The other thing I want to quickly do is to talk about positive and negative space. And remember, positive space is the object, negative space is the space around an object. And usually it's light, the object is light, and the space around it is dark. So we have positive and negative space, composition and perspective today, with a hint of texture and pattern. Next week I'm hopefully going to be able to talk about colors, I should say, in black and white, hues and shades, and bring in more about texture and pattern, because texture and pattern it transcends over other elements. So hopefully you'll be able to see. Well, remember, in my tiny little painting, if I show you up close, you can see there are ridges. I like to build up paint on a canvas. That's a texture. And there's shadows from that when the light hits it. It's just abstract, but you've got the feeling of the earth and the sky and the sun just in that little painting. And eventually it's going to be 4 feet by 4 feet. It's a study. That is a study for a painting. Okay, so I did this, put this glass sculpture or still life together. I'll show you up close. I'm sure you have things in your home where you can put together, the texture here is glass. You might keep thinking about what textures are. And they're different shapes. Here's a curvy face. It has swirls on it. You can't really see those very well. And here's like a jar, a square jar. It is a square. It's a square with a round circle. I might just leave that down like that. And then a plain large cylinder right there. Okay, so if you want to put together a still life, pick some things that you like and start drawing them on your little sketchbook, and do different angles if you want, and try to figure out the texture with light and dark spaces and the space around. First I think I would draw a contour drawing. Here we have, and try to just stay one line. Okay, and then around here we have this one. And then we have the square one. We have the square one. I don't know if you can see this or not. As I said, this is a raw footage in my kitchen studio. I don't have a tech crew, unfortunately. But here we have a contour drawing of those three objects. They're glass. I haven't even started working on the texture of glass, but that can be fun. It takes a lot more concentration. You might just experiment on how to do it with charcoals. So, let's see if I put that here. I would like people to see that if you can. Perspective, contours, contour drawing, perspective drawing, and off the plane, on the plane, and disappears into a new spatial with abstract. And then we have gesture drawing, sketches of the inside energy of an object, mainly a person, and those are lots of fun. I shared my my jazz group, one of my jazz group drawings that was all gestures and instruments and everything. I have 4 of those, and I cherish them. And I did that live when they were performing. So, I hope I have shown you and explained what some people think is elusive and they can't get there. Yes, you can. And someone can talk about it, I talk about it, and you can learn the words to use when you describe your art or other people's art. Don't think of it as, oh, anyone can do that. Oh, that's crazy. Oh, that's nothing. That's just scribbling. What does it mean? No. Just find out the treasure underneath what you see. There's lots of things to learn in art, and especially in your contemporaries. Right now we're living in an exciting time. We live in a visual society. It's visual, and you need to learn about it and know what it means. And abstract art in general, is the umbrella over science from the power of observation. Science, mathematics, engineering, technology, all of those are part of the art world. And the great geniuses of the world, the theoreticians, those people love to be in abstraction with visual artists, and they often get together and discuss things so they can free themselves and learn more. It's a wide open place to go, and it's your spirit and your soul that opens up to it through the intuition. I hope you've learned something about practical side of art, the visual paper and charcoal, pencil, whatever you use, and the idea that you're trying to put on paper visually and what it means, and in historical perspective, what it means. Find out where some of these things fit and why they were there. Kandinsky and his friends in the Bauhaus are very interesting people to find out about, and the terrible oppression that they were under and persecution. We actually have that going on on our planet even today. You would think not. You'd think we'd all be free, but no. So it's important to find these things out and express your freedom, express your joy of life in something visual soon, maybe today. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope I will see you again next week when we talk more about the elements of art and creativity.